Thanks so much for joining me on the Listen Up Girl podcast. Before I get started in today's episode, I wanted to ask if you could please go to the description of this podcast and click on the audience survey link. I have a ton of ideas for this podcast and my other podcasts, Everything and Anything and a Bit Gay. And before I start making new changes or invite new guests, I would love to get your thoughts and feedback on my podcast and get to know who you are. The survey only takes 10 minutes, and I really appreciate your time. But let's get into today's episode where queer news hits different. Honest, bold, unfiltered, and delivered with heart. Again, I'm your host, Zach Randles-Friedman, and today's episode into politics, power, free speech, justice, and the latest attempts by anti-LGBT groups to turn back the clock on marriage equality. Our first story is Ric Grenell. Under Senate investigation for mismanagement at the Kennedy Center, Ric Grenell, Trump's former U.S. ambassador, self-proclaimed gay conservative icon and leader of the Kennedy Center, is facing major scrutiny. Senate Democrats have launched an investigation into his leadership, citing concerns about excessive spending and a dramatic drop in cultural institutions' financial performance. In a public letter, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse noted that the Kennedy Center, a symbol of artistic excellence, has seen bleeding budgets, questionable contracts, and inflated salaries. Since Grenell took over, ticket sales have tanked, donors are pulling back, and cultural programming has become increasingly politicized. Critics argue that Grenell, known more for cable news combativeness than arts administration, has turned prestigious institution into a partisan playground. Some of the board members say morale has plummeted among staff. Others accuse him of appointing unqualified allies to high-paying positions. Grenell denies wrongdoing, calling the investigation a witch hunt, but if the allegations hold up, his tenure may go down as one of the most contentious in the Kennedy Center's history. Next, we go to State Department quietly rewrites human rights reports. LGBTQ plus protections removed. A leaked diplomatic cable shows that U.S. Department is officially shifting its human rights report to prioritize conservative religious issues, while deprioritizing reports on LGBTQ plus persecution, torture, and politically motivated killings. The directive instructs diplomats to redirect focus away from structural violence faced by marginalized groups and instead highlight topics found in the Heritage Foundation's policy list: religious freedom, conservative interpretations of family values, and free speech cases involving right-leaning activists. Human rights experts warn this change is alarming because U.S. human rights reports are used by governments, courts, asylum systems, and international watchdogs to assess global safety risk. Removing LGBTQ plus persecution from these reports could endanger asylum seekers fleeing violent countries. Advocates call the move a state-sanctioned erasure of queer suffering, and some diplomats reportedly push back internally, saying this will distort global human rights data. Our next story is Maryland woman pleads guilty after vandalizing transgender symbols. In Maryland, a woman named Cyan Radis King has pleaded guilty to criminal property destruction after spray painting transgender symbols around several locations in Easton. The vandalism appeared near a Catholic elementary school, an Ulta Beauty, a liquor store, and an outdoor shopping archway. She has originally charged with a hate crime, but prosecutors dropped that count, citing the lack of explicit targeting of specific individuals. Still, LGBTQ plus advocates say the symbols, especially placed near a Catholic school, were meant to intimidate trans people and stoke community tension. The judge ordered restitution for damages, and the case highlights a familiar challenge, proving biased motivation under existing hate crime law, even when the message is clearly aimed at marginalized groups. Local queer groups say they hope the incident opens conversations about bigger legal protections for trans people in the state. Next, gay MP Josh Newbury shares his sexual assault story in Parliament. In a powerful and emotional moment during UK International Men's Day debate, openly gay MP Josh Newbury revealed that he had been raped 10 years earlier on a night out. His voice shook as he told the House of Commons that silence around male sexual assault, especially among queer men, continues to perpetuate stigma and shame. Breaking his silence can mean those of us in a privileged position telling our stories, he said. His remarks were met with a rare bipartisan moment of quiet respect. Newbury said he hopes sharing his experience will encourage more survivors to seek support, especially men who fear they will not be believed or may be judged because of their sexuality. Advocacy groups praised him for his bravery, saying, "This kind of visibility is essential to dismantling harmful stereotypes about masculinity and victimhood." I love that he spoke up. It's very brave, and I agree. More people like him speak up, the more people will speak up in the future. Next, Epstein files ordered release, but accusations fly that key records are all still hidden. Congress has voted overwhelmingly to release government files on deceased sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. The House voting 427-1 and the Senate approving by unanimous consent, but the drama isn't over. Senator Ron Wyden is accusing Treasury Secretary Scott Besnick, who is openly gay, of hiding additional documents that could shed more light on Epstein's finances, his global network, and the powerful associates who still may be protected. Wyden says the Treasury Department stonewalled his request for months, prompting fears that the crucial evidence could be withheld or destroyed. Both parties in Congress say the public deserves transparency, and the families of victims have demanded full disclosure. Whether Besnick is actually withholding documents or whether this is a political posturing remains unclear. But one thing is certain, this story is nowhere near done. And our last story for today is new plan to overturn marriage equality targets children of queer parents. For over a decade, conservatives have tried and failed to overturn Obergefell versus Hodges, the Supreme Court ruling that legalized same-sex marriage nationwide. Now, anti-LGBTQ+ advocate Katie Faust says she has a new strategy to kill it, prove that kids raised by same-sex parents are harmed. Faust announced she is partnering with the Family Research Council, a designated hate group, to search for victims of same-sex parenting who will testify that their lives were damaged by having LGBTQ+ parents. Legal experts say the strategy is desperate, absurd, and impossible to prove. Decades of peer-reviewed studies have showed children raised by queer parents fare just as well as those raised by straight couples, and sometimes even better due to stronger communication practices. But the goal isn't science. The goal is to create emotional propaganda strong enough to sway conservative court judges. Advocacy groups are preparing for the prolonged fight, warning that marriage equality remains far more vulnerable than many believe, especially with a right-leaning Supreme Court. And if you look at a lot of these cases when there's child abuse, it is not gay couples or queer couples or lesbian couples or transgender couples. It is most of the time a straight white man that does this. That is my news for today. Hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Thanks for joining me as we work through political investigations, written human rights policy, courtroom development, brave survivor testimony, and unsettling new efforts to overturn marriage equality. Again, I'm your host, Zach Randles-Friedman. Stay proud, stay loud, protect your energy. And as always, don't forget to join in next time for more LGBTQ+ news.